Committee Member Breeding,
Here.
Vice Chair Chen,
Here.
Committee Member Larson,
Here.
Committee Member Merchant,
Here.
Committee Member Peterson,
Here.
Committee Member Woolley.
Here.
Great. Chair Choi.
Here.
Wonderful.
All right. So now let's move on to public comment. If anyone, or actually, no, sorry. If anyone has any questions or comments about our agenda, we can talk about it. And if not, we can get a motion to move on.
For the minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. I mix them up too. There are no comments. Anyone can make a motion?
I move to pass the minutes. Accept them.
Second.
Okay. Committee Member Breeding. We just lost her. Vice Chair Chen.
Aye.
Committee Member Larson.
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant.
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson.
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley.
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Yes.
And circling back to Committee Member Breeding.
Yes.
Okay, March 17th, 2021 minutes approved.
All right. Now, if anyone from the public has something to comment on that's not on the agenda, they can speak up now.
At the moment, I don't see any attendees in the Zoom room.
All right. Could we move on to the presentations then?
Yes,
Or the announcement, sorry.
announcements, yeah.
Can you all see my Google Chrome webpage? Wonderful. I'm going to combine our two announcements because they're pretty much the same thing. I'm sure as you are all aware as climate enthusiasts and environmental activists, this month is Earth Month, this week is Earth Week, and tomorrow is Earth Day. And to celebrate, we've put together again our albanyca.org/Earth Day webpage to try to adapt to the virtual format of Earth Day again this year. We've again partnered with the Watershed Project to create I don't want to call it fully virtual because it's virtual and also go out on your own to do an activity around Albany. There's a map/trail activity. If you click on under the Watershed Project description here, register to participate, you'll be emailed information about how to engage with the Watershed Tour activity that the Watershed Project put together to teach the Albany community about our watersheds, protecting our watersheds and also the planet as a whole. So we're very excited to have this launched. We also developed 2 versions of an Earth Day bingo card we're hoping will be popular this year among the Albany community. We have an adult/teen version, and then we also have a kids version, which was created by our teaching expert, Michelle. So we are hoping that folks are downloading these bingo cards and engaging in some climate actions so we can raise awareness about the work we are doing and the actions that people can take every day to celebrate Earth Day every day. And then once folks complete their Earth Day bingo cards, they can email or mail them back to us, and we will put names into the hat for a raffle for some sustainable prizes, which are TBD. Stop Waste is hosting a number of Earth Day events, all virtual. So if you want to check out their calendar events, visit Stop Waste page, also linked here. There's an East Bay Green Home Tour, not happening this month, but we included it on this page to help folks mark their calendar if they're thinking about Earth Day. There will be some virtual tours of local all-electric homes and a Q&A session by some all-electric experts, as well as the homeowners and residents. So register for that if you are interested. I've heard that registration is through the roof, which is fantastic because that means that the East Bay community is interested in these green home tours. There's the Drive Clean Bay Area Earth Day Drive Clean-a-thon this Saturday. And then there are also virtual resources available through East Bay Regional Parks, Friends of Five Creeks, Energy Upgrade California, which you may have seen ads about the Keep It Golden campaign recently on Hulu or on billboards throughout the Bay Area. And then there's, of course, the Earth Day Network. And if you want to see a little bit more about what we're promoting, follow us on social media. So this is the combined Earth Day 2021 / regional sustainability events and resources updates. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. All right. Seeing none, I pass it back to you, Chair Choi.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie. So there's no presentation, so we're going to move on to item 6-1, which is our, I think, final discussion for our Climate Action Committee work plan for 2021 to 23.
Yes. Now let me pull that up. First, I'd like to ask the committee, I did post 2 versions of the work plan on the agenda. One is a non-formatted version, so it's not put into the standard format that work plans typically are formatted by when they go to council. And one is the absolute original version. The text is the same on all of them. It's just the formatting and some of the boilerplate language is different on one. But I want to make sure I pull up the right one that the committee all agrees on. So does anyone feel strongly that it shouldn't be the formatted version or should be the formatted version?
Formatted is fine with me.
Okay.
The that has the same verbiage that was put forward. I noticed it has the preamble to the
Yes.
policy. So as long as that's all the same, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine with me.
All the same. Great. So let me pull this up. Okay. Can everyone see this? Great. So if I remember correctly, where the committee left off is after this, after the green infrastructure section, we landed here, the other initiatives, and the committee wanted to run through those together one by one. And then also, if anything new comes up, Michelle has been taking notes about what ideas have come up that maybe aren't reflected on here yet in the discussion from last time, and we'll continue to take those notes as well. So then we will turn to Michelle. But I will just start with collaboration with other committees, commissions, boards, and agencies. A, promote CAAP actions that are relevant to the efforts of other city commissions and committees, and review and provide comment on all advisory group actions that are related to the CAAP and sustainability. Any comments or concerns? Okay. If you don't mind, if you do have comments, if you can verbally shout them, I can't see everyone's like nods or hands right now. Or Chair Choi, if you don't mind calling on people, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
I guess one comment I just had on this point is in some of the direction for putting together a work plan, I think some of the guidance that Jeff issued, I think in particular, was that we should pretty carefully consider what's under the committee's purview versus what's sort of the responsibility of other committees. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like, it's not really clear to me what action items would result from this particular item being in the work plan. Does this mean that, for example, like if another committee put together like a vehicle transportation plan or something like that, or some kind of parking thing, that it would come before the Climate Action Committee for review?
I can kind of speak to this. I think this is in because I drafted it this way. I find the city a little stovepiped in how things, and it isn't always, we don't get early opportunity to impress on other activities the importance of some of the climate action things. So we sort of we get a little blindsided. So this was an attempt to make sure that there's an early on involvement or referencing to at least the CAAP. So it's a little bit of a passive thing. But I think it would be good if we, proactively reached, we don't really communicate a lot with the other groups. So this would be a way to proactively keep an eye on and, at least make comment during early decisions with other groups, especially transportation and planning.
Yeah, I like it for just, as a communication vehicle to city council that, just a reminder, climate action cuts across various different things, and we want to make sure that we're, cross-functional.
Okay.
Sorry,
Next,
were we doing 4 and 5 at the same time, or did you just do 4?
we just did 4A.
Okay.
Now we're on recommend that council endorse state and federal actions that promote a rapid transition to sustainable energy sources and methods.
Sorry, just a question on this section as a whole. Like it reads that they should be delegated to community groups who can build volunteer efforts to promote them. Like, how does that actually, I guess, interact with the Climate Action Committee? Like, I think it's okay for volunteer groups to do anything that they sort of have a mandate to do, but it's not really clear to me why, I guess, this whole section is in the work plan at all for the Climate Action Committee.
I think this was an attempt to address staff concern that were too many things in the work plan, but that the importance of these are still there. I can't really remember why this delegation to community groups came up. I think the point here is that these are 4 and 5 as far as priorities. So the focus would be on 1, 2, and 3 for our primary efforts.
Okay, maybe just to clarify, so is the understanding in the committee that items 4 and 5 are community actions and not Climate Action Committee actions?
No, that's not my understanding at all. They're on here because they're part of our work plan. Again, I'm not sure how this was something that was in another format and got mixed around and so Lizzie, maybe you can address why this mentions the delegation to community groups. I can't even remember where that came from.
I'm a little confused where we're referencing community groups.
In the header above 4.
I think Committee Member Peterson, sorry, I think you added this in, and I didn't touch that language.
Well, I would be for taking that whole header out. I think that the main thing is these are of a lower priority for concentrating our efforts on. So if we get through doing all the first parts, this is stuff that it's just ongoing things that are critical that we do.
I think that makes sense too. I don't think that delegating to community groups is, I think
I don't think we need that in there. And I think this was this was sort of put together. That may have.
You just muted, Nick.
I'm just saying, I don't think we need that,
Yeah.
that whole statement.
Yeah. I think we might have talked about delegation, about, engagement at some point, and maybe that got built in somehow. But I agree. Let's take it out.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now we are on community education and engagement. Review CAAP progress annually and present results in a well-publicized and public session of the Climate Action Committee.
Yeah, I had a, Lizzie, could you scroll up in the preamble to the whole thing there before 1? It says, does it make reference to why certain things are bolded? Because those were the high priority. I think that's somewhere it should say where the priorities are.
I believe I took this directly from your version, your preamble.
Yeah, it says in bold below.
So it's the 3 priorities. So it says and identified. So maybe there needs to be something in there that just says highest priority or the bolded 3 priority areas or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up at some point in this, that it says in here, the following list of initiatives are in order of priority and potential successful emissions reduction. And I was going to bring that up at some point. I don't know if we want to talk about that now. I don't think these are necessarily in a list of priority order below. 1, 2, and 3 are high priority items. I don't think they're in a list of priority as it sits right now. So I don't know if we want to talk about that now or later, but.
Well, when one of the efforts, when
number 1 is, if you can scroll down, Lizzie. Number 1 is building electrification. I don't think that is necessarily more important than zero emission transportation in terms of priority. In fact, I think there's a case to be made for the opposite, but.
I think I agree with that sentiment.
Well, it depends on whether, maybe, there's a larger component that's transportation, but it's much more difficult to affect housing. So it depends.
I don't see why we have to say what the priority is in this work order list right now. I don't think we're necessarily putting this in an absolute order of priority right now.
So the intent was to have the high priority items come first. And I would be more than happy just to eliminate 4 and 5 and just leave it the way it is with 1, 2, 3.
Well, I still don't think that it should be read as building electrification is number 1 priority and zero emission transportation is number 2 priority.
Yeah, I am not super strong on one or the other. I just think we need to have high priority ones that we focus on, rather than just outreach, which is eating a lot of time and not accomplishing much.
Right. If you go down, 1, 2, and 3 are sort of our high priority areas, right? I think that's all that needs to be said.
Question.
Yep.
Suppose that we submit this work plan and it's approved by the council. Would we need to follow it in the order of priority? Then does it really matter?
No.
That's sort of my point. I don't think that we need to say in the work plan what the absolute lockstep priority is.
I think this is residue from when I first put this together. There were something like 14 or 15 points, and staff said to me, "This is a lot of stuff. It should be more in a." And it seemed to me it would be more effective to put the priority things and sort of prioritize it. So it sort of carries that, and maybe it doesn't need to carry that anymore, especially if we just make a statement that the top 3 are where the highest priority. And
right. And up above it says, identified 3 priority areas where the city should focus resources and efforts in bold below. And then I think that that's all we need. I think we get rid of the sentence that says the following list of initiatives are in order of priority.
Can I jump in real quick and just note that most committee and commission work plans don't have this kind of verbiage underneath policy review and initiatives. So it seems to me that if the committee maybe doesn't agree on what it says in here, we could take it out and just know that the work plan initiatives listed below are the agreed upon work plan initiatives without even writing about prioritization, because this piece isn't a requirement to go to council.
My point in putting it in is that I think if you look at this, most of the effort that we've been doing and that staff has been doing is on item 6 or 5, outreach. You know, all these things that we put on the website, which we have really no indication are bending the needle at all. The biggest thing we've done is recommended to council the putting in place the East Bay Community Energy at Brilliant. And everything else has been only very modestly penetrating into the community. So my intent on this is to remind us right in the work plan that there are 3 priority areas we need to focus on, and they have specific goals, and we should stop our focus on just generating outreach items that are geared towards voluntary action and think more about things that make mandatory action.
And I wasn't saying get rid of the paragraph. I'm just saying that one sentence in the middle where it ties us to that these are in order of priority. I think just get rid of that, and then I'm good.
Anyone else from the committee?
Yeah, I agree. We could get rid of that sentence.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, seeing nods. Moved. Shall we go back down to outreach? All right, we are on community education and engagement. Review CAAP progress annually and present results in a well-publicized and public session of the Climate Action Committee. I apologize if I got confused where we landed on this one. Hearing no comments, to B, promote community engagement with the Carbon Free Albany Challenge with a goal to have 2,000 households enrolled by the end of 2023.
Yep.
Okay.
Like that one.
That seems really aggressive. 2,000?
Oh yeah.
That's our goal? Okay.
More aggressive, the better.
Okay, so this goes to 2023, so it's in 2 years. This thing has been doing very little. It's either going to work or it's not. So we need to put the effort into it to make it work. And that's doing things differently than we've been doing it. So I think we'll get into talking about this, but I would be more happy to just take 4 and 5 out, and we won't focus on these items at all, and we'll just focus on 1 through 3.
I would think we want to, I'd be good with leaving them in. I mean, we just created a subcommittee to talk about communication. So I think we should give this some effort.
Yeah, I would like if 5 as a whole would stay in.
Anyone else?
I like the in 4, I like the node to kind of collaboration and being aware of what other commissions and committees are doing and how it might, how we might be able to leverage that or promote it or just talk to the right people to help them make informed decisions of how it will impact emissions to the extent they're making decisions that might. And I think that seems like when it becomes apparent that there is an opportunity there, we can make those recommendations. But that doesn't seem like a high workload item to include, but I think it could be important.
Okay. As staff, we are neutral, but I want to make sure I hear one other committee member who is either in favor or not before we decide whether to keep it or move on.
In favor.
So I've got 3 in favor of keeping it, but not quite a quorum. Do we have one more?
Same.
In
Okay.
favor.
All right, cool. We will keep this text. So that is the end of the draft work plan. I want to just real quick, Picky, if we can change this word to remodels. Maybe I'm missing something, but I think that's the, okay. So this is your work plan as it stands now. Now is the point where we'll take a step back and see if there's anything the committee feels like it's missing from this work plan. I'm going to zoom out so it's a more whole view.
Well, I mean, there's always more we could probably park in this, but again, it's, you know, we only have limited amount of time and staff time and volunteer time, committee member time. These are the priority items that we really need to focus on. I think within each one of these, I would argue there's plenty to do. And I would say this is pretty complete.
I don't know. I just had one comment. Sarah, how do you want us just to kind of shout out, or?
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to call on you.
All right. In the zero emission transportation in A, there's it reads, including providing financial incentives that decrease the number of ICE vehicle trips traveled. And I found that sentence to be good, but sort of limiting in just, you know, like it's just about decreasing ICE vehicle trips. So I was thinking about something like, you know, facilitating adoption of zero emission transportation modes, as well as decreasing the number of ICE vehicle trips. Just something to broaden it a little bit. We're talking about spending measured DD revenue in line with goals of the CAAP. And I think that something like facilitate adoption of zero emission transportation modes would add to that sentence.
Facilitate, can you repeat that one more time?
Facilitate adoption of zero emission transportation modes, or, you know, we could wordsmith that, but I guess I'm just, to me, it reads kind of narrow.
Mm-hmm. Anyone opposed to the language that was just added? All right, I see a quorum of nods no. So I think we're gonna leave it. Great. All right, anything else? I'm gonna make one suggestion too. Sorry that we change it to internal combustion engine, just to make sure that folks who aren't in the world of transportation know.
Yeah.
Who we are referring to, or what we are referring to. Okay.
I have one more.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in the zero emission transportation, in the CAAP, there is a strategy that says encourage use of active transportation through education and incentive programs. And I know we just talked about, you know, the communication and outreach hasn't been getting us there, but it felt like there wasn't really anything in here about an effort to educate and incentivize the community in especially zero emission transportation. So I wondered if that strategy from the CAAP should go in here.
I kind of want to add to that, and I noticed there's something later on the agenda tonight that was talking, that had a lot of graphs that was showing how reliant Albany is on natural gas, especially for residential. And I think that's going to require a lot of education to get people to shift, because I think a lot of people aren't even aware of the impact of that. And I think there are a lot of people who are still very pro natural gas and think of it as a clean energy. And so in terms of like, I think is in addition to zero emission transportation, I think community education toward building electrification is going to be important. But I don't know how well positioned or what resources we have to be able to do that. Committee member Peterson's point is well taken, that these sort of like mandatory policy changes and mandatory like the East Bay Community Energy, that those are more impactful. But I think that education is going to have to be some part of it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good addition.
Yeah, I wasn't saying there wouldn't, I mean, certainly as part of these 3 initiatives would be disseminating information, but hopefully with incentives also. So I think it certainly makes sense. I mean, the outreach is sort of, I mean, you can't do it in a vacuum, but it's, I get a little worried when we spend all our time just telling people about the situation. And, we need to move beyond just the strictly, asking people to please do something and really encouraging them to do something. I think we can, if we roll out incentives or actual things that people can really do, they'll pay more attention to it too. I mean, there's a lot of information out there about climate change and where we're at. I think people are tuning it out just in a sense of denial. And we can explain it to them all we want, but unless we have some solutions for them or things that incentivize them, they're not going to do anything.
So I think what I'm hearing is we want to add, so I'm not sure, are we adding something about education and outreach, speaking to both building electrification and zero emission transportation and adding it under 5? Or are we adding separate items to 1 and 2? Does anyone have a preference or thoughts?
I think that could fall under 5 and under the purview of our subcommittee. I think that's something we can handle.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Makes sense to.
Okay. Seeing nods and thumbs up. Does anyone have thoughts on exactly what this point should say?
Well, if we're going to highlight that and have it down at 5, which is considered, well, I guess we took the priorities out. I would put it maybe first and say focus outreach efforts and education on the 3 high priority issues to ensure that community is well educated and understands necessary actions.
That sounded pretty good.
Sorry.
That sounded pretty good.
I did not catch all that. Sorry, it's hard to listen and type. I have focus outreach and education efforts on the priority items above to educate the Albany community.
What I got was to focus outreach and education on 3 high priority issues to ensure community is well educated and understands necessary actions.
You know, one thing that I think, and we'll get into this when we talk about the subcommittees, there's a real need, and I see Berkeley is trying to develop this, is almost like a action center or a place people can get in touch with, or even proactively reaches out to them and puts on seminars or does whatever's necessary. And really, it really pushes the information out in a very proactive, almost in your face kind of way, rather than passively, just hoping people will click on a link and possibly do something. So trying to develop something a little bit more proactive and broad reaching, I think, is really essential.
Jeff, would you mind finishing that sentence one more time for me? To ensure
Sure.
the Albany community is educated on the,
Is educated and understands necessary actions.
does anyone else that sounds good. Does anyone object or approve?
Looks good.
I'm gonna add the
using-
educated on. Yes?
Using the word and education and then also is educated seems just a little bit like a stutter to me. Maybe either remove
Just,
and education or
yeah,
or remove is educated on.
I'm supposed to be neutral, but I will note, I feel like maybe removing that the Albany community is educated should be the piece that is removed. I think it reads a little strange.
How about we say focus outreach on proactively on the 3 high priority issues and get rid of end education. Focus outreach proactively on.
Is everyone okay with ensure the Albany community is educated on and understands the necessary actions?
I think we could get rid of is educated on and have it just say to ensure the Albany community understands the necessary actions.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody disagrees.
Seeing nods. Great. Okay. Anything else to discuss? The next step for this evening for the work plan would be to recommend that the council approve the work plan. The work plan goes to the city council. They consider it. They may adopt it as is. They may make changes. They may send it back to the committee. But the next step for the committee is to recommend the work plan, if this is the work plan the committee agrees upon.
This is a minor nit, but when we removed the paragraph describing 4 and 5, it caused the section headers for 4 and 5 to become bolded, which makes the intro paragraph that talks about 3 items being bolded as priority items a little confusing. So
Did we
this is like
I think we removed the sentence about bolded, right?
no, it says and identified 3 priority areas where the city should focus resources and efforts in bold below. So now there's 5 things that are bolded, and
I bolded them.
I think it's just like a formatting thing.
Why don't we take the in bolded out? I don't think we really need that anymore.
Okay.
Should we specifically identify them as Roman numerals 1 through 3?
Wouldn't hurt.
I think I like that idea.
You mean the calling out the priority items rather than saying bold, saying 1 through 3?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
How's that?
Uh-huh.
I think that rather than saying priority, I think you can just say items 1 through 3 below.
there a motion to recommend this work plan to the Albany City Council?
Sure, I'll move to recommend the work plan.
I'll second.
Okay. Committee member Breeding,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chen,
Hi.
Committee member Larson,
Aye.
Committee member Merchant,
Aye.
Committee member Peterson,
Aye.
Committee member Woolley,
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Aye.
Wonderful. Jeff, would you mind clarifying for me? I think typically the committee also elects one. Does staff take the work plan, or?
Yeah. So usually staff will be asked to very briefly make an introduction about the committee's work plan to the city council. That usually that's just a minute or two. And then, as many members as usually you would designate a spokesperson to go to the council meeting and elaborate. We're going to give a very high level, quick 1 or 2 minute summary. A spokesperson among you would go to the meeting, go into more detail, and elaborate both on the content and the process that you went through. And then if there are questions from the council about why did you do this instead of that, it's likely that the committee member or members, it could be more than one of you that are there speaking to the council about this. You would probably be the ones to first respond to that and explain your prioritization or your choice of words or so on and so forth. So I think if you can decide now who should be prepared to attend, that would be great. Of course, you can adjust if schedules don't accommodate and that kind of thing. We can administratively take care of that, but it'd be nice to have that ready now. My guess is that this would go to the city council on May 17th, which is also my guess of when there will be a study session on the city's budget. So you'll probably, many of you or several of you at least may probably want to be there anyhow to talk about that. So that would be, that might be a convenient target for us to try to put them together.
That was May 17th, you said?
Yes, Monday, May 17th. These dates can change for all sorts of different reasons, but they're kind of, at the moment, they're pretty stable.
For what it's worth, I think I went at the time, I believe Max and I went and presented to the council. I had just become vice chair and Max was chair. Not that the chair and vice chair have to go, but I'm just kind of curious if there's anyone else here that would like to, have that experience. It's kind of fun.
I'd be happy to go. I'm a little nervous about presenting before the city council. I've never done that before, but if someone else would be willing to go with me, I would definitely appreciate that.
You know what? Sure, I'll do it. Why not? When exactly are we talking about?
May 17th.
Sometime in the evening of May 17th. I can't guarantee when in the evening, and their meetings can go to 10 or 11 o'clock sometimes. We usually try to do these things up front, but you never know.
Give me half a moment. May 17th, you say?
And I'm more than willing to go along too, seeing as I've kind of done this before, and I think I'm the longest term member of the committee. I'm more than happy to be there and help out. I think I'll probably be speaking about budget stuff anyway.
And because it's a public meeting and you're speaking on something that's already on the agenda, all 7 of you could go. It might be a little clunky if all 7 you get up to respond to a question, but this is more just kind of managing who's going to be the first one up or the first 2 up to respond to a potential question that you might get.
Sure, I can go.
there's been no plan to revert back to in-person meetings yet. That's a ways off, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Believe that concludes our work plan discussion. Back to you, Chair Choi.
All right, now we have item 6-2, which is our first discussion on the budget priorities for next year or the upcoming 2 years.
So I can give a quick introduction to this. I think you talked about this at your last meeting, and there was some kind of general discussion about wanting to pick some budget priorities that some actions that would be visible, so that and tangible to the voter, so that you can demonstrate to the voter that their vote in support of Measure DD was meaningful and makes things happen. And the idea here would be, when you go to this budget work session, you probably want to address the council to ask them to make sure that 1/3 of the increase in taxes is allocated towards climate action measures, and that you have some ideas about what those might be. I think it's always better to ask for when you're asking for money, to be able to say, this is what we're going to use it for, rather than to just say, give us the money and we'll figure it out later. Is a little tougher thing to sell, particularly when the city is we're doing okay financially, but by no means are we out of the woods. So the council will be thinking about, how do we balancing other priorities with money. So this is just again a chance for you to collectively think about what you want to present to the city council at that meeting. And maybe I'll just pause right here to see if you have any questions, or folks just want to dive right into potential discussion.
I had a question for you, Jeff. Obviously, we haven't quite developed real hard specific issues. We have some general ideas. Could we talk about incentives? I mean, I think what we want to spend it on is incentives for electrification, incentives for EV adoption, especially looking at developing more charge points, especially for people who can't have them at their homes. And then assisting in rolling out more tree planting to improve green infrastructure. So being, without specifically saying, we're going to buy X number of trees and give them away or something like that. I mean, is that specific enough, you think?
I think that's you hit it just right. You don't want to try to sell the whole program in one night, but you also don't want to start developing a program unless there's going to be some money behind it. So you could say exactly what you just said about incentive programs that do A, B, and C. And again, this is just a study session, so this is their chance to say, they love the idea, or maybe they say, hey, we need more information about that. Can you bring that back to us when we continue the discussion of the budget in the following month? So I think, if you all agree on something like that, or whatever, that's about the right level of detail.
Question.
I'd also add, I'm sorry, I'll just one more piece of information, then I'll be happy to answer your question. The finance director still doesn't have enough information to make a solid projection of actually how much money we're talking about. So all of this is a little, we're getting in early, which is good, but it's still early.
That was my question, was do we have an estimate?
No. It's a challenge to work with the utility companies to implement these taxes. It's a kind of a bureaucratic challenge, and she's going to talk about that in the meeting. And then once you kind of get them collecting it and sending us the check, then we like to see a few months cash flow just to make sure we're getting what we hope we will get. And then you can really start to feel more comfortable that, okay, it's safe to go spend, $50,000 on this or $100,000 on that or whatever. Yes, Nick. Excuse me, committee member Peterson.
Is it worthwhile for, as the committee, to put together almost like, that we all come together and make an agreement that, hey, we see this going towards these categories of items, and this is what the whole committee is presenting. I mean, I'm just wondering how should we present it? Should it be formally done in the sense of the committee makes a motion to present to the council, or can just some of the committee members show up and explain what we think we're doing? Probably the former looks a little better to the council.
I think it is better for you to be able to say that you're there representing the group and you discussed it and you passed a motion that this is your recommendation. Committee member Woolley?
Yeah, similar question. Would it be sensible not just to talk about categories? I like the idea of incentives and prioritizing those, but I wonder if it would be sensible for us to drum up maybe a wish list of priorities for spending DD money, and perhaps on that wish list we could include, some very specific projects. That, it might have to do with greenery in a certain area or something like that, public greenery. But yeah, I had, because I live near like the Pear Street Park, I'm thinking of that one because like that could totally use some greening, just for example, and it's very visible and it would have, a sizable impact. It might be a good investment. Would it make sense for us to drum up a wish list, including projects of that nature?
I think you're using a good example of Pear Street Park. There are different people who have different ideas for Pear Street Park. And so you might get some people really excited about your other idea, and then other people might say, hey, wait a minute, we're talking about something completely different. Is it a mountain bike course or is it a soccer field? So I think you want enough detail to get people excited about the idea, but not enough that you're getting people not excited about it, if you follow my drift. So I would not recommend, as an example, I think you're making a good point that's let's go into that history sometime about that park. I wouldn't go with Pear Street Park as an example, because I do think there are different constituencies in the city. And I could see if council members saying, well, if you're talking about that, I don't want to fund that. I don't want you to get caught in that trap.
So it sounds like we'd be better saying like, oh, we want to fund 500 trees, and we don't say where they specifically are.
Yeah,
it's going to happen, and they could go to Pear Street Park. So we want to probably thinking in terms of just the higher level goal.
Yeah,
and then at least people can visualize that. Wow, that's a lot of trees. That would really help.
Yeah.
Or say, we want to get 150 homes to switch out their gas water heaters to heat pump water heaters, and put it more in terms of that. We're not even saying that we're going to give them even a specific amount, but there might be incentives involved. So
yeah,
because there's money, we're going to be leveraging it to do as much as we can with it. So got to be a little careful about the numbers if they're too unrealistic. But that at least allows you to give people an idea of what's accomplished without saying exactly where it is.
Right. I think as you develop the program, the idea of having that numerical target, and it's a 500 tree, the program can be called 500 trees or whatever. But I agree. You don't want to, you don't want to try to sell the whole program, a whole new program in detail in your few minutes that you're going to have to make a pitch.
Which brings another thought to my mind. Of course, council is rightfully always concerned about putting a big imposition on staff or public works or some other entity. It seems like the idea with the DD funds is this would be like kind of a soup to nuts thing. It's like, we want to take this money and we want to do it, including whatever costs it takes to do it, not just buy a bunch of stuff and throw it at public works and say, it's your problem now. So we should probably address issues such as that too.
Yes. Yeah. I think you're right. If there's already enough work for the current city staff, particularly in the public works department, which is fairly significantly short-staffed, and council members feel like many of their priorities that they already have are not getting addressed. So yeah, I think if you, as part of the presentation, say that you would like to have funding to create a program, and that program will be self-contained, with staffing or with outside resources or whatever to help get it from conceptualization to execution, I think that's a good idea.
Jeff, I had two pretty specific questions more related to staff. So I guess the first one was, are there any examples in the past where we've participated in other grant programs to sort of ease the administrative burden of, running a grant program ourselves? And just sort of like, how does that usually work? Is there sort of like a specific grant process that you identify and then you talk to that organization and just figure out how it works? Or I'm a little curious about how that's been implemented in the past, or if it has.
What we've talked about doing, and I'm not thinking of an example that we've actually executed on recently, but if there is an existing incentive program that Bayrin or Stop Waste or some other organization has, and they're giving somebody $300 to do something, to change out a water here, that's not enough. That may not be enough to kind of make the nudge happen. We double it, or we just link into their program. A different kind of example is we do use in many cases, the PG&E CARE program, which is their lower income and senior housing, the senior program. If you qualify for that, you would qualify for our reduced rates on something. So it's a little bit different context, but it's the same idea of having somebody else, another organization, do the kind of the screening and qualifications, and then we're leveraging their money to make it happen. Now, I'm not sure there are other organizations that are doing all the things you wish they would do, and we might have to create our own, but where we can, that would make our life a lot easier. And Lizzie, if you can think of an example where we've already done that, I'm just not coming up with one, but maybe there is
one off the top of my head.
Okay, and then another question I had was, do we have a plan for sort of municipal building electrification or upgrades already in place, and it's more of a funding thing, or is that just kind of unscoped?
We don't really have we don't have a current action plan. We need one, and we talk about it, but we don't have one on the shelf that's ready to go.
I think that was under building electrification, and our work plan was a city. I think we have that on our work plan. I can't remember off the top of my head. I hope it's there. But both with zero emission, it was city fleet decarbonization, and then also the city buildings. So one thing I'll kind of put in, I'm involved with the district, and we are right now have put together an RFQ for a solar power consultant to help the district put out an RFP for installing solar power, with the mind being that this is key to them getting to full electrification. They haven't exactly approved putting out the RFQ yet, but I'm hopeful they will. but there might be some opportunities for the city and the district to work together on that.
So should we just start a list of ideas and then maybe talk through them?
I think it would be good for the committee to have a discussion now about, you know, what's your elevator pitch, as they say, when the city council discusses these funds.
Yeah, so to prepare for this agenda item, I did list down a couple of things. I think they're in several different areas. So sort of in the urban forestry category, something that I found pretty compelling was that the Arbor Day Foundation has a designation called the Tree City USA. And the requirements for it are actually pretty simple. You have to spend roughly $2 per capita on a tree program, have a tree board or city arborist, and have some kind of tree care ordinance. So I think using Measure DD funding as sort of a way to, sort of get a tree care ordinance on the agenda would actually be a pretty compelling way to sort of use that money. And I think the community would love having more trees. So that was my first one. My second one was just municipal sustainability in general. I think that Albany might lag behind a little bit here. It is a little unfortunate. I think that if we had done solar upgrades, say a year ago, for instance, we'd probably get better net energy metering rates than we do now. But today is the best day after yesterday to do it. So I think the first step to that would be putting together some kind of I forget what it's called, but it's sort of like an emissions survey, and just working using DD funding to sort of bring in experts to figure out, what actions to take. And then I guess the last category I had was a little more broad, but it was just sort of participating in existing grant programs that are around the Bay Area today. Jeff, I think you actually mentioned the two that I was most excited about. Bay Ren, I think, has a program for doing electrical appliance upgrades. And if we could participate in that, or if they have the capability to have that targeted towards Albany residents, I think it'd be awesome to have that as an incentive. Stop Waste, I think, has some similar grants out there. I haven't looked through their list, so I don't have a particular program in particular. Then I guess the final one I had was the Bay Area Air Quality District. I always forget what the abbreviation.
BACMUD.
Yeah, BACMUD.
Or you can just say Air District. But yeah, either way.
They always have a lot of really compelling grants. I know they worked with the city of Benicia a long time ago, I think, to maybe have a tree program or something like that. So yeah, I think it's kind of a similar thing where, we can leverage DD funding by working with partner organizations and sort of piggybacking off of some of their effort.
Daniel, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. When you say the municipal sustainability, are you talking about kind of what we were referencing with upgrading actual municipal facilities? Okay.
Yeah, it's a little broad. I mean, this encompasses everything from building upgrades to adding electrical vehicle charging stations. I believe that NREL has kind of a list of what 20 cities around the United States has done in the past. So that might be a good starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll follow Dan and jump in. So I think I sort of similar thoughts, again, leveraging with Bayren or others to do building electrical appliance conversions or gas appliance to electrical. Having literally, and I think when we initially do this program, it would be very good to have it really go back to the people that voted it in. So as much as possible, help residents and then in some sense, the challenge there is going to be making sure that that's equitable. I mean, if people, one thing I kind of struggled a bit with is, you know, giving incentives to upper middle class people to buy a charger to plug in their electric vehicle. They probably don't need as much of an incentive and can handle it on their own. But if you have people who are renting in multifamily housing, and this would be more of a challenge, but to develop some sort of incentive, or maybe through a series of pilot programs, look at least installing level 2 charging at multi-unit rental housing. And, you know, so that was kind of, I think that's a big one. If we could make that successful, that would be good. But on another sense, maybe you have some, just for other people who are considering it, just need a little bit to tip them over, you know, is waive permit fees or fund partially charge stations at private homes. But I would be very careful about that because, you know, again, this is the idea of incentives and wanting it to go to people that won't eventually just do it anyway, the people that really have hurdles to get by. I like the idea of a tree planting. One thing I was thinking with that, and I had also come across that arbor entity certification and did a little research. I think El Cerrito has a really good tree planting program. I think it's called Cerrito Tree or something. And it's an all volunteer group and really spearheaded by, I think, one gal who really got it going. But a question here would be, could we use these funds to essentially launch what would eventually become a Albany non-city funded volunteer organization, sort of a tree planting group that you get enough, you know, oomph for them doing, again, a pilot, maybe picking one street that has 0 trees and going and putting a bunch of trees in. And then if it kicks off, you know, the thing would snowball a little and we could start getting more trees planted. So that was another idea, was somehow get that going. Or I think there is a tree planting program pretty much that the city does, just supplement that and cover the cost of the tree or whatever now the homeowner, her volunteers, whatever they had to do, somehow the cost is supplemented or helped or something, so that there would be more of a desire for people to get a tree planted in front of their home. So, and then I think you could find similar, the one I was thinking of for EVs, again, thinking of people who have a bit of a hurdle to get over to actually do that, was, you know, it'd be wonderful if we had this resource center where people very interested could come and they could get all the information they needed and help with the application. I think the city of Portland does this. If you're income qualified for most of the grants and benefits, they'll really help you file all the paperwork, get everything done, and purchase your vehicle. And then also work with you to potentially use some of those DD funds to get a more viable charging point where you live, even if you live in a rental situation. So I think that would be a very beneficial program, because the more people saw this coming into place, they would take on the task of sort of figuring this out. So those were my ideas.
You know, with respect to trees and urban forestry, I think one of the actions in the climate action plan, and it pops up in other places too, is for the city to really create a good urban forestry or urban greening plan that's contemporary and deals with, you know, the process right now is kind of clunky sometimes, and that's because we have clunky old processes that we haven't taken a comprehensive look at. So we, you know, that's something we know that's in the future one way or the other, and this funding may help get that rolling more quickly.
They're expensive plans.
Yeah, we've been Lizzie's been looking into them.
So are we just sort of brainstorming on topics, or are we proposing like specific things we want to, I mean, Nick, you started off with, sort of checking on the level of, where we want to get to. I think Jeff sort of gave us some guidance on that. Lizzie, are we going to like put something in front of us so we can start talking about, or how do you want to run this?
I can share my notes if that's.
I mean, I've got a couple things I want to
look at.
plop in. I think probably other people do as well. Just didn't want to.
Yeah, let me pull them up.
This will be a ongoing agenda item, right? I mean, if we're getting ready we've got a month, it sounds like. A little less than a month. So.
But we should get some, I thought you were saying we should get some medium level proposals in the hopper so that we can get them in front of the budget committee and start saying what we want to, petition for money for, right?
The study session is before the next Climate Action Committee meeting, correct?
Yeah.
As it's scheduled right now, that's true. I think it's going to be that day, but I've learned from experience that sometimes as we get closer to that day, it's the finance department may need a little bit more time, so it could change, but I think it's a better than 50-50 chance it will be 17th.
Because I heard, I think we want to propose, at least one thing in the building electrification and one thing in the zero emission transportation at least. And it sounds like we've got a lot of ideas around the green tree kind of thing. So I wonder if we want to try to get like a proposal for each of those so that we are, proposing, like I was just making some notes like, create a program including financial incentives that facilitate adoption of zero emission transportation modes that are equitable with a focus on renters and low-income residents. Something like we just said in our work plan. Let's turn that into a proposal for funds. This is the time to do that, right?
I think it's the time to put it out there. I don't think you need to get into detail in a program.
Yeah, right.
I think it's the time to, in a few sentences, yes, I think you're saying that you're giving the right amount of detail right now.
Okay. So that's my proposal. You want me to read that so we can put it in front of, I didn't see a chat function in here.
There's no chat function for Brown Act purposes.
Okay.
Yeah, to read it slowly to me, please.
Okay, here's my proposal. Create a program including financial incentives that facilitate adoption of zero emission transportation modes that are equitable with a focus on renters and low income residents, and then I don't know, maybe we can stop it there. I went on to like describe some examples, but I don't know if we need those or not. So
yeah, you earlier you also said something about building electrification.
Well, I was just saying that I think our committee, it seems to me we would want to propose something like this in each of our 3 top priority areas, just to make sure that we cover at least getting off the mark with something that we want to propose in those 3 areas, if those are our priorities. Like we just talked a lot about building electrification, so can we consolidate that into a proposal? Something like panel upgrades or, along those lines. So anyway, that's my.
Chair Choi, do you want to call on
Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, so I think we're kind of all sort of saying the same thing here, because I heard Dan talk about urban greening and tree plants, and then also electrification planning for city and municipal, both buildings and fleet. And then leveraging, I think an important thing is to develop electrification plans that leverage on existing regional entities. I think you have that down with BayRAN and BAQMD. And then I agree with Eric on the EV, where maybe, I don't know if we need to get more, if Jeff is saying, keeping that level of vagueness that, some sort of program, we don't know what it is right now, but focused on multifamily. And that might even be a pilot project. I think there would be a real advantage to reaching out to landlords and building owners and seeing if one of them are interested in developing a pilot project where electric vehicle charge stations, at least a couple, are implemented in their parking facilities. So, I think this is something that we're not going to have a silver bullet, here's how you do it. We're going to have to try a bunch of different ways. And I like how Eric had phrased it, that the focus will be on that. We could also have some simple and not huge incentives to get middle and upper class people just to take the leap. If their concern is putting in a charge station, there might be some assistance on that that's moderate, but that we would use most of it for. And I don't know, Jeff, if it's worth saying, at least 50% or 60% will be spent on population that has the most challenges meeting these goals. It's probably good to say something like that, right?
I think it's good to say that you would like to have a specific target. If you were to put out that number, say 50%, I would be prepared for someone to ask the question, why 50%? And then, but I do think it's important it's super important to talk about the equity aspects of these programs and to acknowledge that you're taking it seriously, but not to go into too much detail. Your goal here is not to sell them on the program. It's really to get them to set aside some money so that you can you're not wasting your time to further develop a program.
Right now, they're in the process of collecting and identifying how much of, and is it DD specific or is it just all the utility tax money, not divided up?
I'd have to talk with the finance director specifically what she's working on. I know there's East Bay Mud for the new water tax, yeah. And then there's PG. There's a lot of work with PG&E on these things. I don't know where exactly she's finding it challenging. I'm sorry to go into the details with her.
Thanks.
So what I was trying to do was get our committee here to put some more specific proposals out in front of us so we can agree on it so that then those can go to the budget. So I was proposing one on zero emission transportation. I don't see it on the screen, but I think Lizzie, you wrote it down. Is the committee, Dan, you had some things about the tree planting. I just feel like we want to take this time right now to get something in writing in front of us so we can, or not just a list of bullet points.
Right. Yeah, and I apologize. I was sharing the draft minutes and not the list of my notes.
Yeah.
But yes, I put everything in general notes except for this one, just to make sure the committee as a whole chooses which ones will go into the proposal. So.
Right.
Yeah, why don't we pick one for each of our priority areas from the work plan? I think that would be kind of a good way to frame it.
Okay.
So I guess the three, what were the 3 priority items for our work plan?
Building,
You know-
electrification, transportation, and urban greening.
Right, so this one is the zero emission transportation.
Yes, this is the one that committee member Larson proposed
Right.
under zero emission transportation.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's small. I'm
so I think the first bullet, I don't know if we want to call it Arbor Day Foundation, but I think maybe launch is a good thing to use, but create a program that's funded by DD for implementing increased level of street tree planting. We might also want to make reference to it would partner with volunteer groups and include helping develop a citywide tree plan.
Yeah, I think all the ideas I heard for urban greening sort of were along the same theme. Are there any other ideas for urban greening that we would want to consider?
I think that's the most important one, is increase. I mean, what we're trying to do with the tree coverage is reduce heat island effects and get shade. So that's the biggest bang for the buck. I mean, that's my opinion. Sorry.
Question about this this tree planting program with respect to the Arbor Foundation thing label. Are we thinking of a plan in which perhaps, you know, any resident could say, hey, I want a tree outside my house, and the city would foot the bill for a new or slightly mature tree? Is that what we're thinking, or is it something where we're picking public land?
Well, that is public land. The median by the street is owned by the city.
Oh, sure.
It's not owned by but then the people where you live have to assume a responsibility to sort of take care of the tree. But yes, exactly. Yes, the answer to your question is yes.
There already is, I know it's not robust, but there already is a tree program for my husband's from Minnesota, and they call that section the boulevard between the sidewalk and the street. I know it takes a while to get trees planted though. My neighbor had a female ginkgo taken out maybe 3 years ago, and she just within the last month got a new tree planted by the city. So I don't know if we need to distinguish between that one, just if the question comes up, to identify what ours is and how it's different.
That's a good question, and I don't know if city staff wants to address that. This is not in any way meant to overrule what the city arborist is doing. Should we make reference to it working with the city arborist? I mean, don't want to blindside city staff into thinking that there's going to be some sort of program they're not involved with.
You know, you can say it, but I didn't get that impression at all. I would assume that we would work with our city arborist on any and all of these and be able to provide him some support.
Maybe we should say support and expand citywide tree planting program.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick time check. It is 8:25 on my clock, and I think we wanted to pick at least one more proposal, perhaps in building electrification. I guess, are we okay on zero emission transportation?
I'm okay with it.
Well, it sounds like we're okay on those 2 areas. So yeah, I guess the last one would be building electrification. And from the notes that Lizzie has on the screen here, I think the things that fall into that are sort of participating in like the Bay Rent grant program, or I guess maybe kind of the municipal sustainability initiatives might fall under building electrification.
Well, I think this is our moment to create something that's city specific and funded by DD and goes directly to what we want to achieve.
Why don't we, I would suggest keeping it broad, like the one for zero emission is maybe say create city incentive programs that partner with regional existing electrification efforts focused on multifamily and rental housing to promote electrification. Yeah. See, regional agencies.
If you just say building electrification, then we've got the latitude to say whether that's
Yeah.
family, multifamily apartments. So just support building electrification.
Yeah, just support building electrification. And that can be appliances, that can be panels, that can be, yeah, I agree. Oops. I agree with what Eric said, Lizzie. So if we could take that last and say and focus on building citywide building electrification.
Back further in your sentence.
No, I think that's right.
That support
The partner with
So are we saying that the incentive programs focus on citywide building electrification, or that?
yeah,
yes.
and that would even cover municipal.
Just see that support citywide
Well,
building electrification.
No,
Yeah.
that support electrification was related to the regional agencies.
So it's and focus on
Citywide.
citywide electrification.
Okay. Sorry, I got.
I'm confused
by
where
the
we're putting citywide.
I got confused by the sentence. Sorry.
So is
Okay, go
this
ahead.
correct? Focus on citywide electrification.
Building,
Building
and then get rid of multifamily buildings. Yeah.
Okay.
Question. Is the focus not on renters and multifamily housing? Why did we take out that piece?
Just to broaden it. So I mean, they're certainly part of citywide. So are municipals. I don't know. We could make separate ones. I mean, we don't have to fit it all into one. I don't know. What do other people think? Should it say with a focus on existing municipal buildings? I mean, existing multifamily buildings?
My
I think
general
there are a lot of
sense,
single family ones that need help too.
yeah, my general sense is that a lot of grant programs tend to prioritize multifamily buildings anyway, because that's kind of where you get the biggest bang for your buck. But I don't feel like imposing a constraint on what's possible is sort of necessary for a high level proposal for budgeting purposes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think with electrification, actually, it probably prioritizes more homeowners because those are the people that can apply and use those programs. Multifamily stuff is at a different level. I'm not sure what's really happening for existing multifamily.
Yeah, I think that there's just across the board, we as a city want to help incentivize. I agree with the idea that the wealthier group should be doing this already, and we want to limit the access to that. But there's a lot of homeowners that are just medium, and we want them to electrify as well. So I wouldn't exclude, I don't want to focus, but I wouldn't exclude them.
I think this is a good statement for the presentation in the context of the budget. It's about the right level of detail, and it will fit in nicely to the 3 minutes or so that you'll probably initially be given, and then you'll have time. You'll have, based on this conversation, the discussion that you're having, you'll have kind of be able to give context to respond to questions if you get any from city council members.
Committee Member Peterson.
Jeff, I had the city electrification of municipal facilities. I noticed in at least in Berkeley's EV action plan, Berkeley has a much bigger vehicle fleet for both school and public works and police. But do you think that city efforts should be separated out here, or is it okay to sort of blend it all together at this point?
Well, when you started this discussion, you talked about you wanting to be something that's visible and that tangible to the voter and to the resident. And I think the city should lead by example, but I'm not sure that's something that inspires. If somebody sees the city electrifying its own building, I'm not sure they feel like they're glad that they voted for this.
Right.
Whereas if they see a street tree or an EV charger that they can use,
yeah,
that's a lot more of a kind of a return to the voter, if you will.
Yeah.
So, might not lead with, hey, we're going to buy the city some new electric pickup trucks and fix the utility, the electrical infrastructure in city buildings. That's not that jazzy to some folks.
So it's probably better to leave that as kind of, okay, let's look into what it would take and sort of start planning it, but not specifically do that in these. I agree. I think that's a good point. Although the city should lead from example, probably should not take the DD funds to do that. It should be part of just
exactly
long range capital improvement planning with the city.
Yeah, thanking the voters for a new pickup truck is doesn't always play well.
Okay. Is the committee satisfied with this proposal? I think we probably should take a motion or have a motion.
I make a motion to adopt the budget proposals.
I'll second.
I heard 2 seconds kind of at the same time.
I'll let Chair Choi do the second.
Okay.
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 And just one last logistical part of this. So the members of the committee who are in attendance to talk about the work plan could also be in attendance to talk about this if in fact they're on the same day. And if not, we'll kind of, without violating the Brown Act, we can do kind of administrative coordination if we need to, if the dates, or you'll have if one of the two get delayed, we'll have a meeting where we can talk about the logistics of who will be at the delayed meeting.
Great. Committee Member Breeding. I'll circle back. Vice Chair Chen.
Aye.
Committee Member Larson.
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant.
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson.
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley.
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Aye.
And Committee Member Breeding.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay. Here we go. Okay. I apologize. I'm trying to catch up on my notes.
Good job,
Okay.
committee.
Sorry.
Good job, committee.
Great. Back to you, Chair Choi.
All right, now we have our discussion on the East Bay community energy default products. But really quickly, should we extend the meeting, or do we have enough time for the other two things after this?
Based on my experience, we will not have enough time. So the committee is welcome to either now extend the meeting or to wait until we get closer to the deadline of 9 p.m. and then extend. I'll leave that up to the committee.
I vote we do this one first and then see how we look.
All right. Okay. But yes, Chair Choi, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We have to remember that our new end time is technically 9. Okay, so I'll make sure I'm sharing the right screen this time. Great. So this evening, the committee does not need to make a recommendation to the City Council as far as next steps goes, but if the committee would like to, that is possible if the committee feels like they're ready for a conclusion this evening. As far as the timeline goes, our City Council must finalize their decision by the end of June. So the City Council has 2 meetings in June, and by the second meeting must conclude our decision making and forward our new default product choices to EVCE before July 1st. So that leaves a little bit of wiggle room. So basically what I wanted the CAAC to discuss this evening, well, I would love to hear committee member Chen's subcommittee report back, because it sounds like Vice Chair Chen has done some digging into the numbers. And then I open it up to the committee to discuss what the thoughts are or what the proposal might be for default product offerings for our different customer categories. As a reminder, the 2 products that will be available in 2022 for EVCE customers are Renewable 100, which is 100% renewable California generated wind and solar. That's about a 10% premium for the average Alameda County customer. And then there is Bright Choice, which is roughly 86% carbon free at this time, 60% renewable, and is a 1% discount to the standard PG&E rates, which is also the standard rate for all Albany customers at this time. And in the middle, you'll see what we're currently on, which is Brilliant 100, just as a point of reference. And again, the committee is able to choose different default products for 4 different customer categories. The CARE-FIRA medical baseline, typically low income customers. Commercial and industrial customers. This includes our business districts, residential customers, and then the committee is welcome to propose something new for municipal accounts, but municipal accounts have already been opted into the Renewal 100 product. So unless the committee wants to opt down, which I had a feeling the committee would not, that is maybe off the table. So if it would help, I can keep up the products for reference, but I open it to the committee, and Chair Choi, if you wouldn't mind calling on folks to, or sorry, I'll pass it to Vice Chair Chen for a subcommittee report back, and then Chair Choi, if you would like to open it to the committee for discussion.
Yeah, I can give a quick subcommittee update. So at a pretty high level, we've pretty much just been gathering information to help make a decision. So I worked with Michelle and Lizzie to conduct a Q&A with the EBC staff, and then kind of reviewed usage data from staff to sort of figure out climate impact on different stakeholder groups. And also I've just been kind of looking at a couple of different changes that have been made since the previous decision. So those are, I think, the time of use transition that's happening. So in general, with East Bay Community Energy, there is a scheduled transition for most customers to switch over to time of use rates versus metered rates. So before, you were kind of charged on if you used a certain amount of energy, and then if you exceeded that amount, you were charged a little more. The change would be that you're charged based on the time of day when you use energy. Some changes related to net energy metering, which is what happens when you have solar panels, how you're compensated for that. And also just in general, East Bay Community Energy has been changing some of their goals around integrated resource planning. So I think that's kind of a new update since the last time the committee discussed this formally. So those are kind of like the high level things from the subcommittee. I guess next steps, I was hoping to gather community feedback, mostly from looking at the survey results from the CAAP that Lizzie shared with the committee several meetings ago, and then summarize some of these findings, which I hope to have done tonight, but I think I will need a little more time on that. So yeah, just in general, if you guys have any questions on any of the default energy products, or there are kind of open issues that you feel would help lead to a better decision, we don't feel like we can sort of make a recommendation this evening, be happy to kind of look into those items and maybe present that more formally in our next meeting.
I think it might. Oh,
Committee Member Peterson.
Committee Member.
Yeah, well, and thank you, Member Chen. Even though I was on the subcommittee, I don't think I did much of anything to help in this analysis. But I do have some thoughts on this. So really, we're down to just two choices for the four different categories. And I think a couple things, and this was in the staff report. I think I just want to emphasize this. East Bay Community Energy is really committed to eventually being at 100% renewables for everybody. And hopefully the quicker they get there, the better it'll be for everyone. But there's probably going to be a period of time, as we have seen with the Brilliant disappearing, where there's just a lot of competition for the carbon free products. And in fact, I noticed where PG&E now is claiming they have zero carbon electricity because, of course, they took all their nuclear and large hydro for themselves and can make that claim now. They can just play with the numbers. And then they dump the gas generated on others. So the thought I was having is what's probably most important is to keep people in East Bay Community Energy and not give them any excuses to opt out entirely, go back to PG&E, or if they opt down and are still in EBCE, that's kind of okay too. So I had kind of a way of looking at that. And I know this might have some slight negative impact on our emissions reduction, but in the big picture, would be more supportive of East Bay Community Energy and sort of help towards the 100% sustainable for everybody vision that we need to get to. And that was really to have the businesses and the low income go with the bright choice. Businesses use, have rather large impact when they're using larger amounts of energy. Sort of the argument there, and if it's a cost factor, they'll just opt out. They'll go back to PG&E because it's a straight business decision. So we want to keep them in East Bay Community Energy, and then give it a try to bump up residential to 100% sustainable, because the low income would be at the bright choice. And then, of course, leave municipal the way it is, which is the right thing to do. And they're kind of leading in that sense. So that was sort of my 2 cents on it.
So we in the memo that you sent out, we as a committee already made a choice, right, based on the same kind of criteria. And so we're now looking at that again to see if that's what we still want to recommend. Is that the?
I think you're welcome to recommend a completely new proposal.
No, but I mean, can you put up what the recommendation was that we already made?
Yes. I don't have it right now accessible, but if I remember off the top of my head, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. It was residential on renewable 100, care for your medical baseline, and commercial accounts on right choice, and municipal on renewable 100. Does that sound right? Let me pull it up. In the meantime, please feel free to keep talking. I kind of have to dig for it.
Well, I can't remember if we formally agreed on that. I mean, this is all that's transpired after Hayward and the other municipalities backed down on the nuclear option one, right? So basically what we had originally said was, well, if they can make it stay the same it was, that's our number one. Number two is the nuclear, and number three was then this other arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, there is no nuclear option. So we can't do that. And they've said they're not going to subsidize it. And so Brilliant is gone. So by that factor, 1 and 2 that we had recommended before are gone. And the third is what I had just stuck with. And I didn't realize we had made that, but yeah, just
in the memo that went out, it said the Climate Action Committee discussed prioritization of potential default products at the September 30th, 2020 meeting. And then it has, so we were going to do the residential renewable 100, commercial industrial bright choice, municipal renewable 100, care FEMA bright choice. So basically what you just said.
Here's the official meeting minutes from the meeting which it was decided.
Yeah, but again, that came out, but you know, the option 1 and 2 have now vaporized.
Mm-hmm.
So what I guess the question now is, do we need to do I mean, I appreciate Dan doing all his work, but maybe the only question is, should all residential go to bright choice or go to sustainable? I think all the other one, or maybe there's a question about commercial too. I don't know. Do people have any feelings about it? My feeling was I would be comfortable staying with the number 3 recommendation we had made way back in last September.
Yeah, Committee Member Larson, maybe to speak more directly to your question, I think there was a recommendation made in September. I think the substantive things that have changed since then, or maybe become a little more apparent, are the transition to time of use rates, net energy policy, I can never pronounce that, net energy metering policy updates, and then I believe in December, EBC sort of announced a commitment to be carbon free by 2030. So some amount of this is kind of already factored into their integrated resource planning. So, you know, kind of depending on how you look at that, that either means that it's more important to switch to renewable 100 to sort of help them achieve that goal sooner, or maybe because they've already committed to it, it's more important to prioritize equity concerns or something like that, because they sort of have it in their roadmap already to figure this out. So I think those would be kind of the main.
So
changes.
time of use, what is time of use, do you think, what does that do to the residential choice? How does that change what we thought of before?
I'd say one consideration to make is just that as we make this decision, energy rates are probably going to result in people having higher bills during the winter months because that's when you tend to use energy more during time of use hours. So I think it could affect perception that you're sort of opting onto a new plan and you're getting charged a lot more for it, and it's sort of an unexpected change. I think that would be kind of the residential concern for that. And I'm not actually too sure about the time of use transition for commercial. I think that that really kind of depends a lot on the types of businesses that are in Albany. I don't think we actually have very good data on that, but yeah, I think those would be the main things.
Also, just to clarify, the council will have to make a decision in June, even based on the fact that they made a decision last year. They have to make a new decision. So the committee's proposal will inform that decision. So I think even if it remains same as it was before, we should go through the formal motion of formalizing a new recommendation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we had gone through this before. So it's fine to look at it and with fresh eyes. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that. I guess I would argue for keeping the residential at renewable 100. East Bay Community Energy is putting us in a little bit of a tough position here. Not really that thrilled with EBCE's actions at this point. So feels like energy companies always slip down this path of reneging on promises, but it's a opportunity. I mean, the Albany residents just voted for DD, so I think that they've shown a willingness to pay a little bit more for doing the right thing. And so I think that residential renewable 100 is worth a shot. A lot of people would absorb that. Other people may want to opt down, but if we know that human behavior is you tend to stay where you're at and not take any action. So
I had another thing that I think could help us out is I think because this is a forced change in our default that EBCE is putting us through, they will cover the costs of informational mailings. And I think we should pursue adding a from the city of Albany message to people that tells them, that explains why we made this decision, and encourage them to please try it out. And if they feel it's just too much of a burden, we fully understand they can opt down, but please do not opt out, because this will help us meet a goal down the line of being totally sustainable, and these efforts are worthwhile. Again, it's interesting. We had pretty good success rate in people not opting out of EBCE, even though there was a fair amount of confusion because the bills are a little complicated, and it looks like you're getting charged twice for electricity, and that's not the case. So anyway, I think that I agree with Eric. If we default people in and put the burden on them to demote or leave, even if a few percentage leave, we're probably ahead in the game. So I think just trust in the residents, and if they don't want to do it, they'll opt down, and having some sort of informational piece that assures them that just staying with EBC is also a good idea. That could help in the total opt out.
I will just note that I do have to check. I think there are some legal restrictions to us. We always have to give the option to opt out. It's a part of the agreement between the IOUs and the CCAs. And so I think messaging from the city will probably be unable to heavily encourage against opt-outs. We always have to include information on opting out.
Yeah, I'm sure the flyer will say somewhere it can opt out. I'm just saying if we can, I'm not saying we tell them stay away from PG&E. I'm just saying, the city took this approach because we're committed to eventually 100%. So this puts us a little ahead. Try it out. You can always opt down or opt out.
Mhm.
So it is 8:55. I guess I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting to 9:30.
I'll second.
Committee member Breeding? Okay. Vice Chair Chen?
Aye.
Committee member Larson?
Aye.
Committee member Merchant?
Aye.
Committee member Peterson?
Aye.
Committee member Woolley?
Yes.
Chair Choi?
Aye.
Committee member Breeding?
Aye.
Okay, great. Meeting has been extended.
Yeah, so maybe as a high level question, do we want to try to come to a decision tonight? Or do you think that it's maybe worthwhile for us to spend our time talking about if we need more information or what kinds of information that everyone in the committee would like to see before making a decision to mull it over a little bit?
I'd be more than happy to make a motion, but I'd like to hear what if other people are kind of hung up on anything. It'd be interesting to know what the reservations are. Maybe that means there are no reservations. So I make a motion that we hold to the original recommendation, option 3, and make that what we would advise the city council when they make a determination on how to replace the default EBCE option for the various 4 levels.
A second.
I would like to sort of discuss the commercial industrial bright choice default. It's a little, the reasoning behind it is a little confusing to me, and I wasn't around for the sort of original decision. So I'm kind of curious why we wouldn't also opt commercial industrial into renewable 100, given that I think from what I can understand, the EBC rate for bright choice is lower than the PG&E rate. So if you were sort of concerned about the rate as a business, you would probably just opt down to the bright choice plan. And if you just didn't know about it or sort of just wanted to pick the default, it seems like it would be more environmentally sustainable to go with the renewable 100 plan. So I'm kind of curious why we wouldn't also opt commercial industrial onto renewable 100.
I think the logic behind that was, and I can't remember exactly what was going on. I guess last September we were in the thick of the pandemic. I think there was some concern that the business community would be a little bit hammered by COVID-19 impacts. And that was implying a little relief on that. Then also not wanting, since they had larger, you'd see, maybe a $5,000 bill go to a $6,000 bill is kind of, it's larger chunks of money. And if they're looking to defer that, they might even opt totally out of the whole EBCE thing and just say, forget it. But I think that's the most we thought of it. So I guess a question to you, Daniel, will be whether it really does need more. I mean, if there's subtleties here, we really need to consider more fully.
It doesn't seem very subtle to me. It's more just like if you were worried about the dollars and cents, I think you'd pick the Bright Choice one because it's cheaper. And if you were worried about renewable energy, you'd be pretty happy that Albany was sort of defaulting to that. So yeah, I definitely sort of relate to business concerns, but sort of as I see it, you know, if you're a business, you're probably more capable of making this decision than many residential customers are. It's a very small number of customers relatively. It's about a tenth of the number of accounts. And I think it's about the same amount of energy consumed, a little less. So it has sort of an equal impact, but fewer people need to make a decision. So kind of as I see it, it would sort of make sense to just opt everyone other than CARE, FIRA, and Medical Baseline onto Renewable 100.
Do you know where PG&E stands on, I mean, on their pricing? With, you know, somebody just said that they have 100% carbon free now. Do you know where that stands in sort of the structure of pricing?
No, I'm saying they say their basic product. In fact, I think I saw that on the EBCE site, which was kind of interesting. I think if you really look at PG&E, they sort of fess up to the overall blend for the state has some emissions in it. But technically they can say, depending on how they report, they can capture all the Diablo Canyon power, which is carbon free.
And large hydro.
Yeah, and take hydro however they want. So
I'm just wondering if Daniel, if you know where that stands in terms of Bright Choice, you know, comparison now.
Oh, my understanding from the memo that Lizzie sent was just that the Bright Choice plan had a 1% discount that was sort of pegged against the PG&E default rate. So I think it's always cheaper.
Right. I think from what I understand, EBCE will always use the PG&E standard rate as like the baseline.
Okay.
Not that there will be a product at that baseline, but it's either a 1% discount to PG&E or 4 pennies per kilowatt hour more than PG&E.
And Renewable 100 is about a 10% premium.
Yeah, the way, like, the
Again,
more precise answer is the 4 pennies per kilowatt hour, but it's about a 10% premium for the average customer. But that depends on the average customer across Alameda County for a commercial account is very, very hard to pinpoint what that account would be in Albany.
Yeah. Huh. I mean, I like your line of thinking, Daniel.
I'm getting the sense that the committee might want to come back to this one more time. Maybe it can be Vice Chair Chen, maybe we can connect offline and think through how to maybe get a better sense of what the average customer might be and what those cost increases might be. Perhaps EBCE can help us with that.
The business
come back.
The business
got a motion that was seconded.
We do. So that's up to the committee. We can either take a vote on that motion or we can discard it. I leave it up to you all.
Anybody opposed to continuing on with the motion?
Well, I can just call for the motion.
Yeah, we can just do it.
Committee member Breeding. Vice Chair Chen.
I think I'll vote nay on this one, mainly because of the proposed change for the the commercial accounts to renewable 100.
Okay. Committee member Larson,
Aye.
committee member Merchant,
I'll vote nay on this one as well.
committee member Peterson,
You're muted.
on mute.
Sorry, committee member Chen convinced me, so I'm going to vote nay on this one.
Okay. Committee member Woolley,
I will also vote no.
Chair Choi.
Nay.
Okay, so the motion does not carry, which leads me to believe we will come back in May with another discussion. Committee member Peterson,
Would people entertain just another motion making the change that member Chen suggested, that everything be the same, but the commercial change to sustainable 100? Would anyone support that motion?
I second it.
So I'll make that motion and Choi second.
okay. Committee member Breeding is absent. Vice Chair Chen,
Yeah, I'll vote aye.
committee member Larson,
Aye.
committee member Merchant.
Aye.
Is that an aye?
Aye. Yes.
Committee member Peterson,
Aye.
committee member Woolley,
I'll vote yes on this one.
Chair Choi.
Aye.
Motion carries. So the official recommendation is to opt up residential accounts to renewable 100, or commercial industrial to renewable 100, and Carefira medical baseline on Bright Choice, leaving municipal accounts at renewable 100. Great. Back to you, Chair Choi.
Now we have a presentation from Lizzie and Michelle. Or just
Michelle's gonna.
On the updates on just our progress for the climate action and adaptation plan.
That's right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. So yes, I'm going to talk to you about the key performance indicators, or KPIs, that we use to track our progress on the CAAP goals. And I'm going to try to move quickly. There's lots of good stuff in here, but we can always answer your questions at the end or come back to it next month too. So I'm going to start off with our overall greenhouse gas emissions. And so everything here is for 2019, since it's too close to 2020 to do a review of all of that data yet. But this shows our overall emissions by source, just to give you a sense of the breakdown. And as you can see, transportation and natural gas are by far the biggest chunks. Together, they make up 87% of overall emissions in Albany. So those are clearly the two places to focus most of our energy, as many of the goals that we already talked about tonight in the work plan highlighted. And this chart here gives you a sense of what this breakdown looks like compared to 2017. And it's the same sectors here, and you can see the total as well. So blue is 2017, orange is 2019. And you can see that our total did drop just a little bit. And that's largely due to the reduction in the building emissions here. And I'll go into some of the more details on that bit in a minute, but that's largely from switching over to EBCE and to the carbon-free energy or electricity. There's also a slight reduction in transportation emissions. This one's pretty interesting because it's a bit more complicated than it looks. The main reason for the reduction here is because the vehicles that Albany residents are using are cleaner. They reduce less emissions per mile. Our overall vehicle miles traveled per day in Albany has actually increased in the last 2 years, largely because our population has increased. But the per capita VMT, or how many miles the average resident drives per day, has actually dropped. And I'll get more into the details of that a little bit later on, but just to give you a sense that there's sort of some positives and negatives within this, which is why you see this like really slight drop. It's not as major as we see in the building sector. Waste is pretty much steady, and then our off-road emissions has actually increased quite a bit. It's a pretty small sector, but this is largely from construction emissions, and this is allocated to cities based on an increase in population. So this is an estimate that assumes we're building lots of new buildings for our increased population. So like I said, a breakdown of that energy, the building energy. This is just focusing on residential. Unfortunately, we don't really have data on non-residential energy use, just kind of due to privacy rules. But as far as residential goes, you can see here that in terms of emissions, electricity dropped to almost nothing, thanks in large part to Brilliant 100. But then natural gas emissions actually increased in that time period. So overall, building emissions go down, but it's really only due to the drop in electricity emissions. And over here in the energy use slide, you can see that natural gas use is increasing, and that it's by far the main source of energy in Albany still, and that gap is growing, which is the opposite of the direction we wanted to go. And I'll note that now that electricity emissions have dropped to zero, the only way to keep bringing those building emissions down is electrification. And as you can see, we're kind of headed in the wrong direction in that world. So now to kind of take a look at the bigger picture of the long-term trends. This is a chart that shows our CAAP goals versus the data we have about the performance in the last 15 years. So this blue line here is the CAAP goal that gets us down to zero emissions by 2045. And orange shows how we've been doing. And you can see that we've actually been, going pretty steadily and actually overperforming our goals in recent years. You'll see especially that there's this sharp drop between 2010 and 2015. And then it's slowed down a little bit in the last few years here, but we're still beating our targets right now. This chart shows the same 15 years, but it breaks it down by sector here. So you'll see again that there's a drop, especially here in 2010 to 2015, and that slows a little bit. And what you can see is that overall the transportation emissions are headed on a pretty linear path downwards. It's pretty consistent. Electricity emissions also pretty consistently going down to basically zero. And the one that's not so consistent is the natural gas. That's these two blue ones here, these kind of light blue is natural gas. And there's a big drop in 2010 to 2015, and then it actually starts to increase a little bit. And this graph shows you that in a way that's a little bit easier to see. So this is residential natural gas use. And you can see this chart is kind of all over the place. It's not really consistent. And there's a huge drop, almost 25% between 2011 and 2014. That is really the reason behind that overperformance. And then it actually begins to increase in the last 5 years, which is why we've seen that slowing in the curve that I showed you a moment ago.
Are you going to go into, is there any explanation what happened?
I spent some time trying to figure that out, and I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. What I can tell you is that this graph looks the same across Alameda County. Every city saw almost exactly the same curve. I was thinking it might be related to prices or weather or something, but it doesn't appear to be. It could be related to, energy efficiency efforts. Seems like a really, really large decrease to be explained by that alone, but you never know. But yeah, I don't actually have a good answer, unfortunately.
We had noticed that before and thought it was related to warmer winter temperatures over that period.
2014, I know, was particularly warm, and it definitely could have had some impact. But I did spend some time looking at weather data, and it wasn't a clear correlation. And in fact, in the last few years, it's been even warmer than 2014, and we still see an increase in gas use. So, but yeah, so I'll keep moving just because I know we're running low on time, but we can come back to it. So moving a little bit away from emissions now to vehicles. Like I said, transportation has been an interesting picture. And even though our overall vehicle miles traveled has gone up, the average resident in Albany is driving less, which is great news. And this graph shows you kind of an explanation of that. This is commutes or transportation to work. And you can see that there's been a steady and pretty significant decrease in people who drive alone. And that's mirrored by this increase in public transit, getting almost up to 30% now. So that's really great news. And like I said, pretty significant. And these other ones down here, they're much smaller, so you can't really see it as much, but they are growing. Walking, biking, carpool, work from home. I'm sure that work from home will show a huge spike in 2020, but we'll probably, see a consistent increase over time as well, I would imagine. So yes, all these things are increasing, which is why we have that lower per capita vehicle mile travel number. And then also the vehicles that we are driving are cleaner. And this is showing EV adoption. And, these numbers are still small, but they look pretty good. Just from 2018 to 2019, the share of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids jumped from 3% to 4.5%. Again, small numbers, but a pretty large jump considering that in just 1 year. And we're really kind of leading the curve in a lot of ways compared to the state and even the county. So that's what's shown here. You see the California curve, Alameda County in orange, and then Albany up on top with a larger number of larger share of electric vehicles. And then it's also growing at a faster rate. So both of those are contributing to our reduced transportation emissions. But again, because Albany's population is growing, that's a limiting factor. It means that there's also, some growth in those vehicle miles traveled. And then to waste. The waste picture is a little bit inconsistent in some ways. So on the left, we see citywide waste, and then on the right, residential, again, in the last 15 years. This yellow line is showing the overall for landfill, recycle, and compost. And you'll see that it's kind of much more volatile on this left side, largely due to business cycles, economic booms and busts. And it's a little smoother on the residential side, an overall decrease. But what you'll notice when you look closer is that the landfill numbers actually haven't gone down very much. It's really recycling that has dropped in particular. This is another one where I don't have a really good answer as to why. It could be related to the recycling market. It's also possible that, you know, people are using fewer paper bags and plastic water bottles. And so there's just less that they're putting into the recycling bin. We don't think that it's people who have just given up on recycling altogether, because we don't see an increase in the landfill use. So a little bit unclear there, but yeah, that's really what's causing the drop in overall waste that you see in the yellow line. And then we have a slight increase in compost. And this here is the diversion rate. Again, it's a little bit volatile, but not really trending in one direction or the other. So diversion, this is just the percent of that overall waste that isn't going to the landfill. It's going to compost or to recycling. And again, it's not really trending in one direction or the other. So this is a place where we haven't really seen much progress at all towards our waste goals. The CAAP goal is to reduce waste in the landfill by 95% in 2045. So there's not a lot happening on that front so far. Okay. No, I ran through that really quickly, but just to kind of go over some of the big points again. Overall, we're on track with our emissions targets so far, which is great news. The two places to really focus in, those biggest chunks of our emissions, are natural gas and transportation. We saw that natural gas chart that you guys noted that really plummets in the mid 2010s and then starts growing again. So reversing that trend is going to be really essential to continuing to reduce our building emissions overall. And then in transportation, like I said, Albany residents are driving less, but there are more of us. So our overall vehicle miles are going up. But we also are adopting EVs at a much faster rate than the city or the county or the state, and using all these alternative commute methods. And so that's helping drive those transportation emissions down. And then the waste and diversion rates are staying pretty stagnant at the moment and not really on track to meet our goals. Whew. All right. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. I know there's lots of good stuff in here. I'm happy to take any questions.
Committee Member Woolley.
Thank you. I had a question, if I may. There was one chart that you showed us earlier that showed the trend that we're currently on versus our goals. If you could go up to that, it was overall. Is that one? Yeah, that one. So I observed that it's around 2020 or 2021 that we're trying to accelerate the carbon abatement around this time, like pretty soon. And the way the trends are going right now, it looks like we are going to be overtaken by our goals. It looks like our progress is slowing at the same time we want to accelerate it. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes. And again, I'll point out that the reason for that slowing in the curve is the rise in natural gas use.
Right. And real quick, I want to put a pin in the conversation because we likely have to extend the meeting again to cover agenda items 6.5 and 6.6.
I can make a motion to do that. What time are we at now?
We're at 9:24. Just for some context, the next item is something we plan to bring to the council. It's a little bit time sensitive because it's based on a state decision. So that is an item you probably want to spend at least 15 minutes on to be safe. And then it's up to the subcommittees to decide how much you want to allot for your updates. But we're at 9:24 currently.
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion that, and I think going through all the subcommittees is going to take a bit of time if we wanted to do that. Since we just got the work plan kind of ironed out, I think the subcommittees need some time to kind of make their efforts match what the work plan focus is. So I would suggest we table that and move immediately to the next one. This is very good. Thank you, Michelle. But I think we get the point, and it does focus on the transportation and electrification are key. And what I also want to point out is Albany is pushing to grow its population and have more dense and more housing provided, which we really should do. But there's still a contingent in Albany that feels every unit should have a parking space, and building housing that doesn't cater to auto-centric use is something that needs big support. So I encourage everyone, when planning has these sessions, that we show up and speak in favor of reduced parking requirements and housing that's near other forms of transportation or supports other forms of transportation.
Nick, you made a motion. I'm assuming that wasn't it.
I second the motion to extend the meeting only for the next agenda item and not the committee updates. That's what I heard.
I was going to give it 15 minutes.
9:45. Okay. Vice Chair Chen.
Aye.
Committee Member Larson.
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant.
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson.
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley.
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Aye.
It looks like Committee Member Breeding is no longer here. Okay, motion carries. Meeting extended to 9:45. And it sounds like we will table this discussion and move on to SB 612.
All right. And that one is also me. So let me just switch my PowerPoints here. All right. Okay, so SB 612 is a bill that is currently in the California Senate. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. And EBCE is supporting this bill and has also asked its member cities to support the bill. So that's the question that will come to you. So this bill is really all about the power charge indifference adjustment, or the PCIA. So just going to give you a little bit of background about what that is before we get going on this. Essentially, PG&E and all these other power companies years ago entered contracts for resources that were meant to procure energy for Albany residents and all these other residents for many years into the future. And those contracts, especially the ones for renewable energy, set a price that is now no longer the market price. So PG&E is paying for these contracts for resources which have prices that are much higher than the market costs. And all customers have to pay for those extra costs. The PG&E customers pay for them in their bill, and CCA customers, like most people in Albany, have to pay for that extra cost through the PCIA, which is tacked on to our EBCE bills. And the way that rate is set is super complicated. I won't begin to pretend that I understand it very well. But overall, the idea is that the total portfolio, the contracts that PG&E has, subtracted by the market value of that portfolio, is that indifference amount. So that means that if the total number of contracts that PG&E has drops, if they, stop paying contract, they buy out of it, whatever it is, or if the market value of those resources increases, then the PCIA will go down. So SB 612, what it would do is a few different things to try to reduce the PCIA for EBCE and all the other CCA customers, and also change the rules to give EBC and these other CCAs access to those resources. So the first thing it does is it requires PG&E to offer a share of those legacy resources to EBCE every 3 years. And EBCE can purchase those resources at the market price and apply it to the procurement requirement. So what this really does is it gives Albany and all the other members of EBCE access to these resources that we're already paying for in a way. And it allows us to actually use those, especially the renewable resources, for our own procurement. And then the second piece of the law would be working on increasing the value of those legacy resources so that the PCIA charges would go down. So EBCE has the option, like I said, to purchase the resources from PG&E. If they choose not to purchase those resources, or maybe only half of them or something, those resources then must be offered up on the wholesale market. And PG&E gets to sell them to whoever might want to buy them. And any revenue that they get from those sales will be factored into reducing the PCIA. Again, it's increasing that value of the resources. And then it also makes a change in the way that the value is calculated if it's not sold on the market. The CPUC is the organization that determines the market value and the PCIA. And so it basically changes some of the rules in the way that they do that to value greenhouse gas-free energy and other new products that might have a higher value than just standard energy. So again, overall, it's allowing EBCE to procure more clean energy and then also maintain bill rates that are competitive with PG&E by lowering that PCIA charge. And the staff recommendation for the committee is to recommend that the City Council send a letter in support of this bill, SB 612. Again, happy to answer any questions. Yes, Nick.
So it says EBCE, but is this set up for all CCAs that operate in the PG&E area? Yeah.
Yes, it'd be across the state, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, Member Merchant.
So who is in opposition to this bill? Is it just the PG&E and the investor-owned utilities, or are there other groups that are also against it?
The only group that I've seen is there's one CCA group that was against it because they said it didn't go far enough. I haven't seen any other opposition to it. It may very well be out there, but I haven't seen it.
I had a question about, so this wouldn't have any impact on the rates that EBC will charge, like they won't be able to then even increase the reduction between PG&E and Bright Choice. I mean, is it going to have any impacts like that?
I mean, I think theoretically down the line it could. I don't know exactly what goes into how they set all of their rates, but I think the PCIA has been a challenge for all CCAs. And so I think it would just generally make it easier for them to keep those rates competitive.
A couple questions. First of all, how does this affect how renewable portfolio standards would be met by CCAs? And also, I guess, sort of in general, like resource adequacy constraints. It seems like if you purchased a bunch of power off of the open market, it would be less carbon free than kind of what VC purchases today. So, or like PCIA assets rather.
Yeah, it wouldn't be off of the open market. It'd be purchased directly from PG&E.
And most of that is stranded assets like, I don't know, like coal plants or something, right?
A lot of those resources are renewable resources. I don't know all of the details of this, but I think a big part of the thinking behind this legislation was that CCAs wanted a chance to be able to purchase the renewable resources in these portfolios. I'm sure there's other resources that are coal plants and stuff, but that, EBC wouldn't need to purchase those if they don't want to.
Yeah, what it sounds like to me is PG&E found this way they had to commit to buying renewables back when they were expensive. So they got this big portfolio of expensive renewables. So they just sit on it and let it come back to them through the PCIA, because that formula means, they can get the CCAs to pay for it. So CCAs are saying, well, if you're going to do that, we want access to it. If you're going to charge us for it anyway, we want to get it. And that way, I don't know who then tells. It's the utility regulators that determine what that can be sold for, right? I mean, PG&E can't just jack the price.
The CPUC is the regulator there, and essentially, the higher the price for these resources, generally the lower the PCIA will be. So I think effectively all of these pieces of the bill are trying to make it so that either the energy is actually sold on the market and that's the actual value of it, or that it's the value is evaluated more accurately.
It isn't locked up in PG&E's portfolio.
Right. Any other questions?
Well, if there are no questions, I make a motion that the Climate Action Committee recommend to the City Council that they endorse and write an endorsement for this bill.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Roll call vote. Vice Chair Chen,
I'll vote aye.
Committee Member Larson,
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant,
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson,
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley,
Yes.
Chair Choi,
Aye.
and I believe Committee Member Reading is absent. Great, motion carries. That concludes 6-5.
I had a quick question. I noticed we haven't been requesting public comment. Is that because there's no one out there other than us in the meeting?
We did have one briefly. A colleague did not raise their hand, but yeah, currently there are 0 attendees. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, Chair Choi, back to you. I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Should we adjourn the meeting?
Well, there is the space for call for future agenda items. If the committee wants to, we have about 6 minutes. Or it can be skipped, up to the committee.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, there was something that we were discussing early on that we were going to continue discussing, but
I think we're going to continue discussing the key performance indicators and potentially continue the budget discussion.
yeah, that was it, the budget discussion. Also, we should make sure the subcommittee reports are done, still on the agenda.
Typically keep them as standing, so
Okay,
we'll keep
good.
it on there.
Wasn't sure. Thanks.
Do those always occur at the end of the meeting? Because I feel like by the end of the meeting, we're often kind of ready, have extended it multiple times and are ready to wrap things up.
The chair, vice chair, and I can chat about organization of that item. I'll make note of that.
Yeah, maybe just next time it'd be good if they were earlier, since we haven't had a chance to really focus on that. I think with the work plan done, we probably do have more time to do that.
Great. All right, Chair Choi, back to you.
All right, so now the meeting is adjourned.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.